So what's your name?
Judy Terry.
Is Lee a family name?
It is. My Aunt Barbara's middle name is Lee. My grandma's name was Rosalie. And we gave one of our kids the middle name Lee, and that's Tinette.
Is Judy, was that like just your own little thing, or did someone else in your family have that?
No, I think it's my own little thing. The only thing my dad said is he didn't want me to be named Judith because everybody would call me Judas Priest because my last name was Prentiss. And how my dad came up with that, I have no idea. So my name's just plain Judy.
Speaking of your parents, what were your parents' names?
My dad's name was Harold Eugene Prentiss, and my mom's name was Betty Lou Major.
And well, your grandparents. Do you remember your grandparents?
Yeah, my mom's dad's name was Archie Major, and my grandma's name was Alice Godio.
That's a fun one.
And my dad's mom, my grandma was Rosalie Edwards, and my grandpa was James D. Prentiss.
Wow. Now with your parents, tell me about your parents.
Well, my dad's unique. That's the most I can say about my dad. He was very different. He was in World War II, and they got married young. I think my mom was 17. Mm-hmm. She was still in high school. And my dad grew up in Barnum, which is, they're going to change the name.
Yeah.
And so you won't know where Barnum is a few years from now. But that's just a ways away from here, a couple miles. And my dad was born in Colorado, and my mom was born in Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
And my mom was, this is going to be my guess, my mom was an insecure person. Mm. And so she didn't feel comfortable around people. Mm-hmm. And my dad was total opposite.
Very open.
Yeah, my dad couldn't talk enough. And my dad quit high school when he was in 10th grade. And so my grandpa said to him, well, you think you're a big shot? Go get a job, because now you're going to work. And so then my dad had to work. My mom went through high school and finished. She went to Lake High School. My dad went to West High School till 10th grade. And when my dad and also me were in school, high school started at 10th grade and then ended at 12th, and junior high was 7th grade to 9th grade. Yeah. So it was very different than now.
Yeah, very similar to my school.
Yeah.
That's how ours works.
Which I think is a better deal, because I think kids, they're in 6th grade are too young to be around junior high kids. They're more aggressive, and it's the same in high school. 9th grade's early to be around 12th graders.
Oh, for sure. With your grandparents, do you remember any memories with them specifically?
Oh yeah. My grandpa, Major Archie, he died the year after I was born. He had tuberculosis.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't know him at all, and nobody really talked about him. And I saw a couple of pictures of him. He was a judge in Jefferson County, and according to what I heard, he was a tough judge. That's why my dad was afraid of him. So when my dad and mom got married, they didn't live together. Oh. Because my grandpa would have killed my dad, is what my dad thought. And so until she graduated, then they lived together. Mm. And my grandma Alice, she was a hard worker. She worked all the time in restaurants. So if I wanted to go see my grandma, I had to go to a restaurant to see my grandma. And my grandma Rosie, she worked at home. I mean, she was at home, took care of the home, because that's what men thought women should do. Yeah. It was a different culture than there. Sure. And then my grandma eventually got a job working at a cleaner's. Oh. And I don't know if my grandpa was still alive then. My grandpa died when he was 76 years old. And my grandma lived to 86. And so she had 10 years by herself. And my grandma always made homemade noodles. And so whenever we would go over to my grandma's house, she'd have them all spread out on the counter and then cut them. And so we always looked forward to that. But my grandpa always said, you kids just come over here to eat. You shouldn't be coming over here. And he was really, really grumpy, but he was teasing, but it was not, as a kid, easy to know he was teasing. As I grew up, I realized my grandpa was kidding me, but he made me feel bad, you know, because I was like, yeah, you're right, Grandpa, I did come over to eat the noodles.
I did.
Yeah, and my grandpa grew up in Virginia, and he was prejudiced, very prejudiced, because in Virginia, in those years, people were prejudiced, and so it was difficult for that reason for him to live in Colorado, because Colorado wasn't that way where, you know, my Aunt Barbara told me one time they got on the tramway and my grandpa said to a black person, you need to go to the back of the bus. And I don't think my grandpa ever got over being prejudiced.
Yeah.
I never saw that in my grandma, but I saw it in my grandpa, and he handed it down to my dad. And I'm not sure about the others, you know, how
Your other aunts.
the other siblings, but my dad took some of it. But my dad wasn't as strong as my grandpa.
Right.
He was better, but he still was prejudiced.
Right. With your grandma, I've heard the story about when they were, was it moonshine? It was when.
Oh, when my grandpa came here, I don't know if it was his first job, but he became a moonshiner, and during Prohibition, you weren't supposed to have alcohol, but it could get it illegally, and he was a moonshiner, and he, and my Aunt Sissy, who was the oldest of the kids, she was a runner, they called him a runner, and she'd run the alcohol down to wherever they took it. But my grandpa, the police were looking for my grandpa, or it might have been the FBI, I'm not sure, because it was illegal.
Right.
And they came to get my grandpa, and he saw them coming, so he ran out the back door. And so they took my grandma to jail, hoping that my grandpa would come show up and get her out, but he didn't. So they finally released her.
How long? Do you know how long she was there?
I don't know how long she was there. The saddest thing that I think is that you don't ask enough questions about your family. And I think that's really sad, because there's so much more I'd like to know. And if it wasn't for my Aunt Sissy, I wouldn't know a lot, because she was into that. But you wait too long to ask questions.
Sure. Speaking of your aunts and uncles, what were all their names, and what was your thoughts on them?
On my dad's side, my Aunt Sissy was Florence, and she was not my grandpa's child. My grandma was married young, and her husband and her divorced really right after my Aunt Sissy was just a little child. And then she married my grandpa, and then they had my Aunt Janie. And my Aunt Janie and Aunt Sissy were both born on Christmas Day, which is odd because in those days they didn't induce people. So it's odd that they were both born on that. And then my dad came, and my dad was born in July 26, 1920. And then my Uncle Jimmy, and my Uncle Jimmy was also in World War II, but he was in the Air Force. My dad was in the Army, in the trenches. And then came my Aunt Barbara, the spoiled one. I think she was a change of life baby, whatever that means to some people, but women go through menopause, and I think my Aunt Barbara came just before that. And my grandma always told me every time my grandpa hung his pants on the bedpost, she got pregnant. So I had 3 aunts and 1 uncle and my dad. And then on my mom's side, my Uncle Paul was a Denver policeman, and I loved him to death. He was killed in the line of duty. But he impressed me with his uniform and stuff. And then my uncle, and he was in the military, he was in the Navy. And my uncle Kenny, he was in the Marines. And then there was my Uncle Archie, and then my Aunt Loretta.
Nice.
So I had 4 aunts and uncles on each side.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
And your Aunt Loretta is still alive, right?
No, she is.
She's the last. And
Yeah, she's the last of my moms, and she's 90, she could be 91.
And then
And my Aunt Barbara's alive on my dad's side, and she's 91. And both my aunts lived to be 93.
93, yeah.
My Aunt Janie and my Aunt Sissy. My dad was 86, and my Uncle Jimmy was probably 76. But my Uncle Jimmy lived a rough life. He did a lot of drinking.
Ah, I see. So where did you grow up?
I grew up down in Denver at 939 Perry Street, and then my dad. I was born in 1942, and my dad went to the service in 1943 or 44, and so I was just a couple of years old when my dad left and went to service, and then we lived there, just my mom and Gary and I. I have an older brother.
Yes.
And he's 18 months older than me. And I have a younger sister, and she's 6 years younger than me, and I have 4 half-brothers. But when my dad came home from the war, my dad's family told him my mom was running around on him. I don't know that because I was little. I never saw that. I never saw some man at our house, and I don't know that. I don't know that it was true, but my mom told your grandpa that if she was going to be accused of something, she was going to do it.
Oh.
I wish she would have told me that, because I had told her, Mom, that's crazy. So then my mom did start running around, and my dad, when he got home from the service, he wanted to go move out of the state to get her away from that man. And so we moved to California, and we lived in California, I don't know, maybe a year, long enough to have an earthquake that scared me to death because the ground opened up.
Oh, really?
And, out in front of our house. And as a kid, it probably looked like it was 3 feet across, but it was probably just an inch or 2. And so that was my first experience with earthquakes. And then when my mom got pregnant with my sister Linda, we came home on the train because they wanted her to be born in Colorado. And then when my sister was about 6 months old, my parents got divorced. And do you want me to go on?
Of course.
At that point, then we moved to, I went to my aunt's, and my Aunt Sissy's, and Gary went to my Aunt Janie's, and my grandma took Linda because she was still a really little baby. And I don't know why it was that way. I just know that's what happened, and it was a blessing. And so then after we had lived with my Aunt Sissy and Aunt Janie we were probably there a year and a half because we both went to different schools. Mm-hmm. And my dad wanted Gary and I to be together, so he went to the Red Cross and they put us in a foster home. And at that point, the foster homes, you couldn't come see your kids only once a month. And they were a grandma and grandpa, that's what they told us to call them, because they were older and their kids were all raised.
Oh.
And they were Mormons, and they lived next to the church and took care of the church. And so we went to church a lot because of them. And Gary and I walked to school, which seemed like a long ways, but we went to Dormill school, which is a really cool school. Everybody should see the inside of it because it's so elegant built, much better than the schools today. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's got a personality. And then my dad, we called them Grandma and Grandpa Frost. They took us on the first and only vacation that Gary and I ever took. And they took us to California.
Oh, wow.
And we got to go, their son was on an aircraft carrier.
Oh, cool.
And we got to go on that and watch the planes come in and land. And then because they were Mormons, we went to the Mormon Tabernacle in Utah. And the fruit there's blessed, because there was bigger oranges than I've ever seen and bigger grapefruits. And we got to go in part of the church, but not all of it, because you have to have been married in the Mormon church to get into certain parts of it. And they wore special underwear.
Oh, did they?
Mm-hmm. Had white garments, and
Oh,
they
right.
wore those all the time. But I don't know what the significance was. And they also weren't supposed to drink coffee, but she loved coffee, and so every time the doorbell would ring, Gary and I'd have to run the coffee pot out the back door, and you can smell coffee everywhere, so I don't know what she thought she was hiding. But then my dad got married, and he married Marcy, and then my dad had a house built over on 429 Xavier, and then we moved in that house. Once we moved in that house, that's when we got out of the foster home, is when we moved in that house. And then, I don't know, Linda was with some friends of my dad's after Grandma didn't take care of her, and so I think she stayed with those people all the time until Dad got married. And so, and then my mom also got married. I don't know about the timing, but pretty close to the same time. She married the man that she was supposed to be running around with.
Oh.
And my mom had 2 boys, and my dad had 2 boys. So I have 4 half brothers, and I think that's all.
Can you tell me about your relationship with your mom?
I loved my mom to death because she's my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And you should love your mom,
Of course.
bad or good.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom lived a rough life. She lived a really rough life because the man that she married they drank a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and he would beat her up. And so we, a lot of times at night we would walk the streets, get away from him.
Right.
And we only spent 3 months with my mom. We spent 3 months with my mom and 9 months with my dad, and that's what the judge decided. And if today he was around, I would tell him what you did was wrong.
Right.
Because what happened was 9 months with my dad, we had all our friends.
Right.
And then we went and we moved to a different neighborhood, and we didn't know anybody. And kids sometimes are friendly, but sometimes they're cliquey, and you're new and they don't want you to be a part of them. So we really never really made friends at my mom's. And then my mom moved all the time, so every summer there was a different house. And my dad stayed where he was. And then when we became teenagers, my dad decided to go to court and get full custody of us. And so he did that. And then we went, then we lived, then we went and saw my mom on holidays and stuff like that. But my mom, she was a good person. She had a good heart, and she just got messed up with drinking, and drank too much, and really probably was an alcoholic, because when she died at 51, and she had a brain aneurysm, but I think that was because she was beat up so much.
Right.
I mean, really beat up. And so she let's see, what was I going to say about her? But between that time, my dad got divorced from my stepmother, and then my dad remarried my mom, which he said he always loved, and he doesn't know why he divorced her, but he always loved her. And so then my mom lived close to us, and she would come over all the time, and she always packed me a lunch because I worked nights. And so she had a good heart.
Mm-hmm.
She just had a bad life.
Right.
Really bad.
Let's see. We know where that. So how was your childhood, besides all the craziness of moving around?
It probably was a good thing for us because we learned about different people and how they care for you and how they care about you. My Aunt Sissy wanted to adopt me, and my dad wouldn't let her. And then all my aunts and uncles were like parents to us. They were really good to us. And when we were kids, every weekend we went to my aunts and uncle's house. That's what you did. You visited your family because there was nothing else to do. and so we were all really close to all our aunts and uncles, and so, well, let's see, where were we?
Just your childhood.
Oh, okay. I think the foster parents we had were really good for us too, and we learned that different people could love you,
Right.
and then my stepmother, she should have never married my dad because she was jealous, and she was jealous of my dad having another wife, and so she was really never good to us kids, and I cared the most about my mom. My brother was willing to let go of her because he didn't like the fact that she drank, because every time he was around her he said she was drunk. I don't know if that's true, and my little sister says the same thing, but my mom meant the world to me, and so my stepmother didn't like that, and so she was very mean to me because of that, and she drank. And she always was going to take her life. She'd take pills, and we'd have to call 911 and have them come. So it was kind of very disruptive, and yeah.
Dang. Let's see. Do you know if there's any famous people in our family, like our lineage?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't. And if they were, they didn't claim us.
Who was your best friend in the family? Like that one?
I would say my probably my Aunt Janie. I mean my Aunt Sissy, because she was very unique. She was really talented, and she always made a lot of stuff and taught us a lot of things, and then my Aunt Barbara. She's a very different person, but I love her to death, and we did a lot of traveling with her as adults. As a kid, I wasn't attached to her at all, because she was still young too, and I didn't attach to her, but as an adult, I did.
Let's see.
And on my mom's side, I would say my Uncle Paul, just because he was so impressive.
Right.
He would always have his uniform on, and I thought it was good that he wanted to be a policeman and serve society. Unfortunately, he gave up his life for it.
Yeah. What are some stories about our ancestors that you've heard?
Like I said, if it wasn't for my Aunt Sissy
Right.
and you, because you've researched a lot, I wouldn't know a lot about them. I know they had to come from somewhere out of they weren't all born here in the United States. So I guess we're like a Heinz 57.
Mixture of all
a lot of different nationalities, and I know my grandma's family came from Germany. My grandma Rosie, they came from Germany, and so but I guess we have a lot of Irish too. So that's again what I said at the beginning. It's sad that you don't ask more questions.
Yeah. We talked about that. What are some traditions that our family has passed down through generations, like holidays?
The only tradition I think that there were no traditions on the major side at all. But the only tradition that we had on the Prentiss side was every Christmas night, we would go to one of the family's houses and we would celebrate Christmas. And that was probably the only tradition we had. My dad told me if I wanted to have religion, he wasn't going to pick it for me or make me have it. He told me I could decide myself, and so when I was a kid, I used to walk down about, 2 miles to a church. And so I in a way I think that was good, but in a way I think it was bad, because you should give your kids some education in religion. And then if they choose not to do it when they get older, then that's okay, but you should at least give them that base.
Are there any heirlooms or objects of significance in our family?
I'm one of them.
Of course.
Well, Grandpa has an Indian shirt that was made, I'm pretty sure by the Indians, pretty sure. And we've kept that, you know, in a bag so that it stays really nice, and it's made out of cow leather, and it's all the beading is on it. He got that from his grandma, and we had like Grandpa gave his holster to Timmy. We had a watch that was that we bought at a antique show that looked like that dealerships used to give those as a reward. I don't know. You know, we've never figured that out. Maybe you should research.
Right.
We gave that to your dad, and that's probably an heirloom. And then the Ty has your Grandpa Terry's Bible, and I don't think she got anything.
That's okay.
I have a vase in my cabinet that is lead crystal glass, and that's an heirloom to me. It's probably, I've had it at least 50 years, and I bought it from some older ladies that had it for a while.
Oh, wow.
And they were having a sale, and they said in an hour everything's going to go on sale, right? 50% off. So I carried that picture around with me for an hour looking for stuff, and then when I got up to pay for it, she said, "Oh no, this doesn't count." So I could have left a lot sooner at the sale.
Right.
And I have, Grandpa got me a cameo, and that to me is an heirloom. And then I think that's probably it. We're not. One time I had a chandelier over my piano, and so I asked all the kids if they wanted it, and Timmy said she didn't want any of my junk. And so I gave it to my Aunt Sissy, and she loved it.
Well, that's good.
So we don't really have, we have a 39 Chevy.
Right.
That's an heirloom.
Yeah.
So probably not a lot of, I have a lot of coins that I think are worth something.
What are some recipes that have been passed down through the family?
Really, I didn't get anything from Marcy. My mom had a couple Jell-Os that she liked, and she used to make bologna spread, get bologna and grind it up and put pickles in it.
Oh.
And those are the two things I remember by that. And my grandma, the noodles were too much work. I never picked that up. And I lived, when I was a teenager, when I was a junior in high school, my dad decided to move me out of the house because my stepmother wasn't getting along with me, and he said it was causing too many problems for him. And so my dad just came home one day and told me I was moving. And he had some friends that their name was Ed Tassett, and they had 3 kids, and they said they would take me, and so I went there and lived with them. And so they had to drive me to high school every day because they lived in Lakewood, and I went to West High School.
Right.
And so then the neighbor next door to my dad, she said, "Judy, why don't you come live with us, and you can help me with the kids," because she had three little kids. And so I did that, and that got me back in the neighborhood. And so the lady that I lived with was Italian, and that was the neighbor, and she taught me how to make spaghetti. And so I don't think we had a lot of handed down recipes. I have some.
Yeah, I'll take them. So what was your experience like in high school? Do you have any fun stories from high school?
I love school because it got me out of the house. It was a safe place for me. I didn't have a lot of friends because you don't want to bring anyone home because you never knew what my stepmother was going to be like. And so Grandpa probably was my best friend, but he was only there a year when I was there. And so I liked everybody, but I didn't really attach to anybody just because it wasn't a good idea.
Right. Were you any
No, I wasn't a social person. I mean, I wasn't in the upper
ranks of the school.
I wasn't the president of the class.
Right.
I didn't do any of that. And when I went to high school, in junior high, I loved sports. And Gary and I built a high jump so I could high jump because I liked doing that. And I set a record I went to Kepner junior high. And I set a record there, and I was supposed to go to the state track meet and compete. But I started my period, and Marcy wouldn't let me go. It didn't affect me. I should have been able to go, but that was her way of punishing me. And so I didn't get to go see if I was any better than anybody else other than at my own school.
Well, at least you got that one. Were you in any clubs in high school?
No, we didn't have as many clubs.
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah, and we didn't really have, as kids, organized sports. If there were, we didn't know about them and we weren't in them. So, no. I was just surviving.
Love that. How did you dress? Were you like a trendy? Were you more like, I'm gonna do my own thing?
No, I think school was pretty trendy then. Everybody wore poodle skirts and lots of underskirts that poked them out. And the more underskirts, the better.
The more underskirts.
I even got told by the principal that I needed to wear less underskirts because when you come down the stairs, it flips up. He told me you need to wear less underskirts. And so, and you had saddle Oxfords. They were a black and white shoe.
Oh, okay.
And I only had those. And then when I was able to get a penny loafers, I thought I was really cool because penny loafers were different than saddle Oxfords, which were kind of ugly. But so you wore poodle skirts and those and a lot of neck scarves and a collar that you could put the neck scarf in, and not a lot of jewelry, or at least I didn't have a lot of jewelry, but neck scarves were popular.
Pretty big,
yeah. And sweaters.
Oh, okay.
Button-up sweaters were popular.
They were a thing.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Grandpa?
He moved in across the street from me. But he didn't really know me at first. I mean, his cousin lived on the back on the alley, because those days you had alleys. And his cousin lived back there, and he hung out with them. And he had another girlfriend. Her name was Pat Harris. And Grandpa liked a lot of girls. He says not, but I know different. And so I only liked one other boy. And when I was in elementary school, we had international exchange kids. And there was a boy that came, his name was Paco, and he came from Mexico.
Oh, really?
And I liked him. But he wasn't a boyfriend, but I liked him. And we went to a movie with a bunch of kids. And then I had a Japanese exchange student that I wrote letters with. And so, yeah.
That's fun. So, how did you make Grandpa like you?
I worked in the front yard a lot, so he could see me. I worked in the front yard a lot, and I got to know his sister, Sharon, and that got me in their house. And so then I could be around him, and he could find out how nice I was. And then that's how I met him. Mostly through Sharon.
Mostly through Sharon.
Yeah, and Sharon reminded me of a memory we have. I mean, I've always remembered it. We decided we were going to color our hair. And I said to her, well, let's do yours first, because I was a little afraid. And her hair turned red. I mean, red, and it was brown. It took us all day to try to get some of the red out, and so we never colored my hair. So
that's fun.
So that's how I met Grandpa.
Yeah.
Just him being across the street.
How old were you when you guys started dating?
I was 14 when we went on our first date. Our first date was one to remember. Because we went to the movies. It was called the Westwood Theater, and it was up on Knox Court and Alameda. And Grandpa drove, and he wasn't supposed to take anybody but me, and his cousin Danny wanted him to go with this and his girlfriend, so Grandpa disconnected the cable to the speedometer so his parents wouldn't know that he drove it farther than, because he had to go pick up Danny's girlfriend. And so we were in the movies, and in comes Grace and taps on our shoulder and said, "It's snowing really bad, we're going home." And so then she saw that Danny was there and his girlfriend, and so she drove. She didn't let Harold drive. And she lectured him all the way home about what he wasn't supposed to do and why did he do it. And so Grandpa asked her, "Could you take Danny's girlfriend home?" And she said no, she can find her own way because she shouldn't have been here in the first place. And so, and then she wouldn't even let him walk me home across the street. She was very angry. And then she also said to Vincent that night, "Something's wrong with the car because the speedometer is not working." And Grandpa got up in the middle of the night and went out there and reconnected it. So that was our first date, and that was pretty memorable.
Right.
And then after that, then mostly what we did is cruising.
Just hanging out.
And there were restaurants that you go to and you park and everybody looks at everybody's cool car. You know, how they fixed it up, and that's how you hung out with kids when you were teenagers at places like that.
Yeah.
And most of them were down in Barnum or in Lakewood. I mean, not Lakewood. We went to one in North Denver that was called
It's Frosted Scotchman.
the Frosted Scotchman.
That's a fun name.
And they were all kind of like Sonic is now, where you come out and they wait on you, but they were roller skates when we were there. And so all the guys were trying to have the coolest car, and the girls were trying to have the coolest guy. So that's what we did as a teenager. I never drank. Your grandpa did. He forgot to add that to his, he used to go to a place called the Hawthroth and drink, but I never did.
How did you react when he proposed to you?
You know, it was pretty insignificant because we were just at the A&W and he asked me if I wanted to marry him. And he kind of got the story wrong. I'm not the one that said we should get married. He said that.
Okay.
Because I was living with Levon, and we were going to the neighbor, and we were going to get married anyway, you know, because we were engaged. And then he said, well, we should just go ahead and get married, because we were going to get married when I got out of high school. But we actually got married while I was in high school. We got married on March 5th, 1960. And then I was buying a wedding dress. You know, I worked since I was 14 years old. I worked first at Dolly Madison, and then I went to work then they opened up a Tasty Freeze on Sheridan by our house, and I could walk to work at Dolly Madison. I had to ride the bus. And so I went over there and worked, and then so I was buying my own dress, and I couldn't afford to finish paying for it, so I got a lesser dress because my dad wasn't going to pay anything for my wedding. My dad didn't pay anything. Matter of fact, my dad couldn't even come outside if I was outside.
Oh, really?
At the neighbors. Marcy would make him come back in because she was not to see me.
Oh.
So, do you want to put that in? And so he...
Hold up. There we go.
Okay.
It should be okay.
Okay.
There's.
And so we got married while I was still in high school, and Grandma and Vincent and Grace kind of paid for whatever wedding we had. And like Grandpa said, weddings were not anything like they were. You had cake and punch and coffee, and that was it. And on our 50th anniversary, I decided we should relive that whole day, that whole life. And so I bought us a topper for a cake and got a cake. And first we went to Looking Good and had breakfast, which wasn't we didn't do that when we were young. But then after that we left and went to the A&W River Stand it's still there, but it's now, I think, a Mexican restaurant, drive-up thing. And we went there, and then we went to the church, and I went up. Grandpa wasn't going to participate in any of this. And I went in to see if the door was unlocked, because I wanted to go in the church and have that cake. And the door was unlocked, and I went in and yelled, hello, hello, I'm here. And nobody answered, so then I went and got Grandpa, and we came in and we ate the cake in the church. And then we left there and went over to my grandma's house. I think I didn't probably tell you, we lived at my grandma's house when we first got married. And we went over there, and I knocked on the door and said to a lady, I moved in this house 50 years ago. And she said, oh. And so I told her about the house. I described it in the apartments upstairs, and then she realized that I really did live there. And so she told me she was really busy, but she said, oh, come on in. And there was a foyer, and so I got to go in there, and then I could see into the room that was my grandma and grandpa's front room. And I said, oh, my grandpa had a chair right there where you have one. So she said, oh, come on in. And so she let me tour the house. And then she said, you can go upstairs and see your apartment, but I don't rent them. I'm a tax lady, and I have boxes everywhere. And so I got to do that. Grandpa never came in. And so I relived that then. Now our churches, we can't relive that anymore, because it's become a different church that we can't go get in. But so now we just have to do something else for our anniversaries.
So when you were pregnant with Ty, how did you figure it out, and how did you feel about that?
Well, I was embarrassed. I don't know why. And so I had my doctor that was a family doctor since I was a little girl, and he was my OB/GYN, and he delivered, he did everything. And so I went to him and I said, Dr. Bronson, I'm not having periods. And he said, oh, okay. And he said, well, how are you feeling? And I told him, and he said, well, let me get Mary. That was his nurse, and she'll come in. And so he said to her, Mary, what do you think could be wrong with Judy? She isn't having periods, and she's been married for close to a year. What do you think, Mary? And I wish I would have just told him I thought I was pregnant, but I just couldn't get those words out. I was too young, I guess, because I was 17 when I got married and 19 when I had Ty. And so it was a good pregnancy. I was sick a lot with morning sickness, and I needed to gain a lot of weight because I was 5'7" and a half, and I weighed 120 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And so my doctor said, you need to gain weight. Well, he said 35 pounds would be good. So at 35 pounds, I was about 7 months pregnant, and he said, whoa, you can't keep gaining weight. And I'm like, well, it's your fault. You told me to gain weight. And so I ended up gaining 50 pounds with Ty. And Ty was a big baby. He was 8 pounds. And he was born on May 11th, 1961. So the thing I remember about Ty bringing him home from the hospital was the lilacs were blooming, and it smelled so good because we bought a house on 845 Hooker after we moved out of my grandma's, and there we had a lot of lilac bushes there, and so you could smell them.
Let's see. Out of all of your children, which one of them was the easiest and which one was the hardest?
No, as kids, Ty was probably the easiest, they got a lot of spankings, the first 3. We never spanked Annette. And I don't know why, because I'm sure that she deserved it sometimes, but she never got spanked. But we used to spank them with the pancake turner. And so I would say Ty was probably the easiest because the more you got kids, and I was working, so I had to work and have kids, and so I don't know that he was any easier than the other ones. But he was by himself, and I just had him and to take care of, and so probably I would say he probably was the easiest.
And which one do you think was the hardest?
Hard in what respect? When are you talking about their whole childhood or just early on?
Any bit of it.
Todd was in trouble more. He pushed the envelope. So I was worried about him. From that perspective, probably Todd, because I had to worry a lot about him because I thought he was going to go to prison because he liked to drive and drink, and I'm sure Ty did that too, but he just never got caught.
He never got caught doing that.
Yeah, he didn't push the envelope like Todd did, and the girls I thought were good, but I later, when they grew up, learned that they'd sneak out of the house. And I don't know how they did that because I didn't sleep well, but they did. So probably if you had to readjust it, you'd say the girls, because sneaking out of the house is very bad.
Let's see. What values are essential in our family and why?
I think work ethics are really strong in our family. My dad, that's the one thing my dad taught me was to have strong, he did it as a punishment, I think, made us work a lot when we were kids. Pull out the refrigerator, we had to clean behind the refrigerator, scrub the basement floors, do the yard work. And I think it was, kind of, you need to help. But as a kid, I thought it was awful, but as an adult, I think it was the best thing my dad ever did for me because he taught me good work ethics and how to do things right. Because if they weren't done right, you had to do it again.
Right.
You couldn't just half it and say, okay, I'm done.
I'm done.
I wish that religion was more strong. I wish that, because that's one place I think I failed. At least, the kids went to church when they were little, but I really didn't push it, and I wish I would have been more strong about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
what's your earliest memory?
when we lived on 939 Perry, the thing I couldn't tell you what the inside of that house looks like at all. I'd love to go over there and knock on the door and ask them if I could come in. But we had a swing on the porch, and all the kids would come over and swing on the porch. But then there was a ditch behind the neighbor's house across the street, and it was a really busy street. Perry is a busy street. And so Gary and I would get our wagon and we'd put all kinds of stuff in it and go out there and act like we were camping along the river and do different stuff. So I would say my earliest memories was going down to the river, the creek. It was a creek. It was probably a ditch. But when you're young, things seem bigger than they are.
Yeah.
And that's my earliest memories of doing that with Gary.
Mm-hmm. What special memories do you have with your parents during your childhood?
That's a tough one. My special, when I was a child?
It could be either childhood or even adulthood.
Okay. As an adult, my dad and I did a lot more together. We went camping. I even retired early so I could go spend more camping with my dad, because he would go to Arizona and stay on BLM land for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be gone that long from our kids. I mean, they were all adults, but I still didn't want to be gone that long. So we would go down there for 6 weeks, and doing that, traveling with my dad. I guess my memories of my mom would be that we finally got to spend time with her, because I don't know why my mom never came to the foster home. I don't know. I mean, I don't know any of that. And I never asked her, but we became a lot, closer when we lived here, because my mom lived up in a trailer park close to us, and I would just say my memory of my mom was that she had a good heart.
That's good. That's a good one. So what did you do for fun as a teenager? Did you?
As a teenager, I think we rode bikes a lot. We were outside all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, to get out of the house was a great deal, but there wasn't we didn't have the internet, we didn't have tablets, we didn't have cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a TV when I was probably 11 years old, and it was black and white, and it was small. And we weren't really interested in it. And so we played outside all the time. We played kick the can, we played hide and go seek. And Gary and I'd go over to the school a lot, and I would high jump. And then our neighborhood was still developing, and so the house next door was being built, and there was, they dug out the basement, and we'd throw dirt clods at each other to see who could hit each other. And one time we hit a neighbor.
Oh.
And he chased us. And then he ran in and hit a clothesline pole, so he stopped chasing us. And then we would just go in the empty houses and, look around, and the electrical work, they would have little nickel-like things that they would knock out a certain amount of them, but they didn't want them all knocked out. But Gary and I didn't know that, so we knocked them all out. And so our dad had to pay to have that electrical boxes put back in the houses, and so. But as a teenager, mostly just went with Grandpa to the White Spot and the different restaurants that he parked outside.
Mm-hmm. Just hang out.
And the only place we had to shop was downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So in downtown Denver to shop. And my first real job, other than working in an ice cream parlors, was at Jocelyn's, and I ran the elevator. You used to have to operate the elevators. They didn't push a button. It was all by handle. And then I got a job with the phone company, the best job I ever had in my life, the best company there was around. I don't know that they're that anymore, but it was a really good job.
Yeah. How long did you work for them?
42 years.
And when you went in there, what were you applying to do?
Be an operator, because I thought that's all they had was people. But when you made a phone call, you had to have an operator make that call. You didn't do it on your cell phone. And so I just said I wanted to be an operator, and the lady was really a kind lady and saw that I had an engagement ring on, and she said, well, when are you getting married? And I said, as soon as I graduate. And she said, well, you don't want to be an operator. And I said, yes, I do. I want a job. And she said, well, we have other jobs, and we could put you in our computer center, our data center. She called it a data center. And you could go work there, because if you're an operator, you have to work split shifts and different things, and that's not good if you're just getting married. And so I went to the data center.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
They were doing Mark Sense, which none of you would know what Mark Sense was. When you called, an operator had a ticket, and she would key in the phone number you were calling from, and she'd key in the number of what you were going to call to long distance, and then she'd say how many minutes you were on there, and how many coins dropped in. They could tell the sound of the coins in the coin phones, and then I ran a sorter and sorted those by, they called it terminating point sort, where the call terminated, and then it would go to a machine and they'd punch in the phone numbers and then the amount of the money, and then they would get billed.
Oh, cool. That's right.
And we had one computer when I started there, and it was nothing sophisticated like there is now. And then I became, after that, when I was pregnant with Ty, you had to quit at 6 months. They didn't let you work. And so I told my boss, I'm going to have a baby, and this is when I'm going to have it. And she said, don't tell anybody that day, because I don't want you to leave. So I worked till I was 7 months pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And then when I went back, shortly after I went back, I was promoted to management.
Oh, wow.
And then I just grew up in that world, and like I said, it was the best the best job I've ever had. Probably pretty much the only job other than the other places, but I would have never left there.
Oh, yeah. Mm. How frequent were family gatherings as a kid or an adult?
Well, my Aunt Sissy owned a cabin up in Evergreen,
Mm-hmm.
and we would go up there a lot. And so every weekend we were with my dad's family somewhere. And so we would go up there, and then on Christmas night we would always be together.
Mm-hmm.
And family was really important then, and not everybody was preoccupied with all the things
Yes.
there are to do today.
Of course.
And so we spent a lot of time together.
That's good. Were there any rivalries or conflicts at those gatherings or just in general in your family?
If there was, we didn't know about it because we were outside all the time.
Right.
The kids were outside, and there was a lot to do in the mountains. And
Mm-hmm.
so if there was, we didn't know. I mean, even when my Uncle Jimmy got divorced and remarried, his wife would come and my Aunt Dottie would be there, and there was never a problem. They seemed to be adults about it and got along really well.
That's good. What were the happiest moments in your life, or are the happiest moments in your life?
Marrying Grandpa, and having kids and having grandkids. So family, yeah, mostly. And as an adult now, I'm happy I had the parents I had because I learned a lot. I learned what it was like to grow up in tough times, and so I'm happy that I didn't have as great a life.
Right.
Because I learned a lot from it.
Mm-hmm. What was your relationship like with your in-laws?
Well, I like to talk, and my in-laws did not like to talk, and your grandpa, he was very quiet when I married him. You wouldn't have gotten a few words out of him, but they had me over for dinner once, and that was because I was Sharon's friend, and nobody talked, and I talked the whole time. I thought something's wrong. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm doing, but something's wrong here. So I just talked, and I'm pretty sure they were, after I left work, went, wow, it's nice to have some peace and quiet now that she's gone. Because I was a talker. Grace and Vincent didn't talk at all, hardly at all.
Yeah.
And Sharon and Norm were both quiet, and Dad and Harold was too. I mean, they were a quiet family. I came from a dad that couldn't talk enough, and so I learned to talk.
With all your children, how did you react to when they got boyfriends or girlfriends, like for the first times?
I was very strict. I didn't let boys come in the house
Oh, okay.
if we weren't here,
Mm-hmm.
or girls. But the boys never really brought girls home. Which they went to their
They went
thing.
to their houses.
But Dean will tell you that. Timmy's husband will say he thought something was wrong in our house because he could never come in. Because if I wasn't home, he couldn't come in our house. And they had to be home by midnight. And if they weren't, they were in big trouble. And then if they sat out in the car and they were still in front of the house at midnight, I flicked the porch light on and off to get them to come in. And the boys, they told us they were going to have a slumber party, and Grandpa said, boys don't have slumber parties, just girls. And they said, oh, there'll be girls there. So that tells you the boys were a little more out of control. And so I was very strict as far as what time they had to be home. And Dean fell asleep in our basement once, and Timmy came upstairs and slammed her bedroom door, and I was like, got up and said, what's wrong? And she said, Dean won't go home, he's asleep. And I'm like, yeah, right. So I went downstairs and I said, Dean, this is Mrs. Terry. You need to get up and go home. And he didn't move. I mean, Dean sleeps like unreal. And so I shook him, he wouldn't wake up. So I got on the phone and called his mom and said, hey, I can't wake Dean up, and so he's gonna sleep in our basement. And I guess he'll be home in the morning, And so that was the only one that ever slept over at our house.
Dean, not one time.
Yeah. But, so yeah, I worried about them. I worried too much about them dating and driving and
All the stuff.
yeah. Ty and Todd both worked at a gas station down on Jewel and Wadsworth, and there was a very not a good person that worked there, and his name was Rappazelli, and he was mean to the boys. And he didn't own the place, but he'd park across the street and see what they were doing at night to see if they were giving gas away free, or if they were working, or if they had their friends. And he told them, I'm gonna kill you kids if you don't start doing what you're supposed to do. And he did have a gun. And so Todd didn't tell me about that, but Ty did. And so I went over there and I told him, you ever threaten one of my kids again, you're gonna be in so much trouble. I said, do not threaten my boys. They're not doing anything wrong. And I said, and I know you pack a gun and I'm not afraid of you, so leave them alone. And he was your dad could tell you, he was not the best of a citizen. So.
Interesting. With your grandchildren, which one do you think you were the closest with?
Okay, this is an answer that I've thought about a long time, and I have a lot of grandchildren.
You do?
I have 11.
Quite a few.
Yeah, and each one of them have a place in my heart, each one of them, because they were all very different, and they're all very loving. We are so blessed to have as good a grandkids as we have. I mean, I probably get a text almost every day from them, or when something's happening in their life, they send me pictures. And so I would just say I have a big heart, and they each have their own space in there, and I have good memories of all of them, and unique things about each one of them. I know you want to be the favorite.
No, I was just asking. No, that's not where that question was going.
But you are the one that gets spent more time
Wow.
with.
What parenting advice would you give to parents today?
I would say consistency is the most important thing you can do. If you tell your kids this is when you're going to be home, or you're not allowed to do that, or don't jump on the couch, you need to be consistent, because if you let up once, then they're going to think, okay, now I know I can do this. And so consistency and teaching them good work ethics and teaching them values and integrity is an important thing for kids to have. So I would say if you do those things and have unconditional love, no matter what they do. They get in trouble, they cost money, you love them no matter what.
Yeah. Through your family, are there certain people that have similar personality traits to other relatives of yours that maybe they wouldn't have met? Or they just have similarities that you notice?
In my family, in our kids? Or,
yeah, like anyone's, like your grandkids or your...
Well, I think our kids are all a lot alike. I mean, they're unique in their own way, but they're all really friendly. They all have a lot of friends. They all do a lot of good stuff for other people, and they're they're all very different. All four of them are very different, but they're all very much alike in some ways.
Mhm.
You know, because they're all good to us. They do, you know, they take time out of their lives to spend time with us, and so they're good kids. We're blessed.
Yeah.
And our grandkids are all good too. Some of them need a little help, but they're all
Yeah.
good.
What do you think is the key to a fulfilling and purposeful life?
I think caring about other people is really the key, because first off, you have to like yourself. And if you like yourself, then you can like anyone. And I just think there are a lot of lost people now, and there are a lot of people that are lonely. And I just think that you need to recognize those things and help those people.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Is there anything else you would like to tell the camera? Or the people, I guess, in this sense?
Grandpa kind of touched on it about the world, the way
Mhm.
the world is, and I could talk about that forever, but mostly I want my grandkids and my great-grandsons and the futures beyond them to live in a free country, because when you've lived in a free country, you are so blessed. And we in the United States take a lot for granted, and we're not as appreciative of what we have. And our country, our world has way too many power-hungry men, mostly, that, you know, run countries. And I'm not saying there aren't power-hungry women, because there are, but they want everything for themselves, and they want to convince us that we shouldn't have those things. And so I wish there wasn't so many power-hungry countries that are being ran, and that everybody could experience the freedom that the United States has. Because you can do anything here, anything. If you live homeless, you can become a rich person if you want to. I mean, the opportunities are here. You just have to want to have that desire. So that I just want everybody to have the experiences we had.
That's good. All right. Anything else?
Okay. I don't think so.
All right.